A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Welcome back to my weird prompts. I am Corn Poppleberry, and we are coming to you as always from our home studio here in Jerusalem. It is a stunning afternoon outside. The sun is hitting the stone walls just right, but honestly, I have been vibrating with excitement to get behind the mic today. We received a prompt from our housemate Daniel that really hit home for us, especially living in such a crossroads of a city.
Herman Poppleberry here, and I have to say, Daniel really put his finger on a phenomenon that defines the expat experience. He was telling us about a friend of his, an Irishman who has lived right here in Israel for 10 years. This guy is fully integrated. He is part of the culture. He is navigating the local life, yet that Irish accent is still as thick and unmistakable as the day he stepped off the plane in Tel Aviv a decade ago. It is this incredible paradox. You can change your climate, your clothes, your diet, and your entire social circle, but that phonetic lilt just refuses to budge.
It really is the ultimate tell, isn't it? You can be sitting in a shuk in Jerusalem or a cafe in Jaffa, talking fluently about local politics or where to find the best hidden hummus spot. But the second you open your mouth, everyone knows exactly where your journey began. What really struck me in Daniel's prompt was this specific friction between adopting new words, like saying paper towel instead of kitchen paper because his spouse is American, while still wrapping those new words in that original Irish pronunciation. It is like the brain is perfectly happy to update the software of the vocabulary, but the hardware of the accent is locked behind a permanent, unbreakable firewall.
That is a perfect way to frame it, Corn. Today, we are going to dive deep into why that is. We are looking at the neuro-linguistic durability of accents. Why do they persist so stubbornly? What actually is an accent when you strip away the social labels and the stereotypes? And why do some people, like certain world-class actors, or that one friend we all have who sounds like a local after a weekend away, seem to shed them or pick them up with zero effort while the rest of us are stuck with our childhood phonetics forever?
I think we should start by really defining our terms, because we use the word accent all the time in casual conversation, but I suspect most of us are using it as a bit of a catch-all for a lot of different linguistic behaviors. When we say someone has an Irish accent or a New York accent, what are we actually hearing? Is it just the way they say their vowels, or is it something much more fundamental?
It is significantly deeper than just vowel sounds, Corn. From a linguistic and phonetic perspective, an accent is essentially a complex combination of three distinct pillars: phonology, which is the system of speech sounds, morphology, which is how words are formed, and prosody. Prosody is the one people often overlook, but it is arguably the most important for the actual feel of an accent. It is the rhythm, the stress patterns, the tempo, and the intonation. It is the music of the language.
The music. I love that analogy. So, even if two people from Dublin pronounce the word water slightly differently, they likely share the same prosody. They have the same beat to their speech.
That is why you can have two people with the same accent who do not sound identical in every single syllable. An accent is not a rigid, fixed layer where every single sound must be exactly X or Y. It is more like a shared set of phonetic constraints and musical rules. Think of it like a genre of music. Two jazz musicians might play the same melody differently, but you still know it is jazz because they are following the same underlying rhythmic and harmonic structures. When we hear an accent, our brains are identifying those underlying patterns, those phonetic fingerprints, not just individual letter sounds.
That explains why the person in the prompt feels like they're reverting to their natural way of speaking when they're around family or other Irish people. It is like a musician going back to their favorite genre after trying to play pop music all day. But why is it so durable? Why, after 10 years in a different country, does the brain still default to that original setting the moment the pressure is off?
This brings us to one of the most famous and heavily debated concepts in linguistics, the critical period hypothesis. We actually touched on some of the mechanics of this back in episode 799 when we talked about first language attrition, but it is worth a deep dive here in the context of accents. The core idea, popularized by Eric Lenneberg in the late 1960s, is that there is a window of time in human development, usually ending around age 12 or 14, where the brain is incredibly plastic regarding language acquisition. During this time, your brain is essentially building its phonetic map.
Right, and once that map is drawn and the ink dries, it is effectively etched in stone, or at least it becomes exponentially harder to redraw.
Precisely. In early childhood, your brain is a blank slate capable of hearing and producing every single sound in every human language. But as you grow, your brain realizes it does not need all those sounds. It starts pruning the ones you do not hear in your environment to become more efficient at the ones you do. This is called the perceptual magnet effect. By the time you hit puberty, your neural pathways for speech production are highly specialized for your native tongue. This involves not just the auditory cortex, but the motor cortex and the actual physical muscles of your vocal tract.
So it is literally muscle memory. When you speak your native accent, your tongue, your lips, and your soft palate are performing a highly complex, coordinated dance that they have practiced millions of times. Trying to change that accent as an adult is like trying to change your golf swing or your signature after 20 years. You can do it if you think about it very hard and focus on every movement. But as soon as you relax, get tired, or get emotional, your muscles revert to the groove they have worn into the system.
That is exactly what is happening when this person talks to their family. The biological cost, as researchers call it, of maintaining a modified or suppressed accent is quite high. It requires constant cognitive monitoring. You are essentially running a background program in your brain to actively override your motor reflexes. When you are with people who share your native accent, that social pressure to fit into the new environment vanishes, and your brain breathes a massive sigh of relief. It drops the performance and goes back to the most efficient, least taxing way of communicating.
I find that fascinating because it suggests that our default accent is not just a habit, it is a point of neurobiological least resistance. But there is also a social side to this, right? The prompt mentioned code switching as a reflex. Why do we subconsciously mirror the people we are with?
That is a core part of what we call communication accommodation theory, or SAT. Developed by Howard Giles in the 1970s, it suggests that humans are social creatures who use speech to manage social distance. If I want to show that I am part of your group, or if I want you to like me, I will subconsciously start to converge my speech patterns toward yours. I might pick up your slang, match your speaking rate, or even lean into a shared accent. Conversely, if I want to emphasize our differences or assert my unique identity, I might diverge and make my own accent even more pronounced.
So, for our Irish friend in Israel, speaking to his Irish family is a subconscious signal of belonging. It is a way of saying, I am still one of you, no matter how many years I have spent in the Middle East. Even if he does not realize he's doing it, his brain is using that accent as a social anchor. It is a hug in the form of sound.
That is a great way to put it, and it highlights why it is so difficult to lose an accent entirely. For many people, their accent is tied to their identity. To lose the accent feels, on some level, like losing a part of their history or their connection to their roots. This is something we see a lot in our discussions about heritage, this value placed on the organic development of identity. An accent is a living piece of your heritage that you carry with you everywhere. It is a portable history book.
That is an interesting point. It is almost like a piece of home you do not have to pack in a suitcase. But let's look at the other side of the coin from the prompt. This person has adopted the term paper towel because his wife is American. He says it still feels foreign to him. Why is it so much easier to adopt a new word than a new sound?
This is the critical difference between lexical acquisition and phonological maintenance. Learning a new word, a lexical item, is a relatively simple cognitive task. It is just adding a new entry to your mental dictionary. We do this our entire lives. Think about how many tech terms or slang words you have learned in just the last 5 years. Your brain is designed to expand its vocabulary indefinitely. It is an open-ended system.
But the phonology. The way you say the word is the how, rather than the what.
You can take the American word paper towel and plug it into your Irish phonetic system. Your brain says, okay, the object is now called a paper towel, but when it goes to actually produce the sounds, it uses the Irish R and the Irish vowel shifts because those are the motor programs already loaded into the hardware. To say it with a perfect American accent, you would have to not only learn the word, but also execute a completely different set of motor commands for every single phoneme in that phrase. It is the difference between learning a new lyric and learning a new way to breathe while singing.
It is like playing a new song on the same instrument. You can learn the notes of a country song, but if you are playing it on a bagpipe, it is still going to sound like a bagpipe.
That is a brilliant analogy, Corn. The bagpipe is your native phonology. You can play any song or word you want on it, but the timbre is fixed. Now, this brings us to the third part of the prompt, the variability. Why do some people seem to be able to switch instruments entirely? Why can some actors sound perfectly American in one movie and perfectly British in the next, while most of us struggle to even fake a different accent for a joke without sounding ridiculous?
Yeah, what is the secret sauce there? Is it just thousands of hours of practice, or is there a genuine biological difference in how their brains process sound?
Research suggests it is a bit of both, but there is definitely a talent component related to auditory processing. Some people have what is called high auditory acuity. They are better at perceiving the tiny, subtle differences in frequency, timing, and resonance that distinguish one accent from another. If you cannot hear the difference between a flap T in American English and a true T in Irish English, you are never going to be able to reproduce it accurately. You cannot mimic what you cannot detect.
So, it starts with the ear, not the mouth. If your input system is more sensitive, your output system has better data to work with.
Precisely. There is a feedback loop between the ear and the vocal tract. People who are good at accents often have a very tight audio-vocal loop. They can hear a sound and immediately translate that into the specific muscle movements needed to mimic it. Some neuroimaging studies have even found that these individuals have more gray matter density in the areas of the brain responsible for auditory perception and motor control, like the left arcuate fasciculus. It is almost like they have a high-definition sound card in their head, whereas the rest of us are working with a standard definition one from the 1990s.
That is fascinating. It reminds me of the Super Translator episode we did, episode 1045 about hyperpolyglots. There is clearly a cognitive hardware advantage for some people when it comes to linguistic mimicry. But what about the people who move to a new country and lose their native accent almost immediately? We have all met someone who spends 3 months in London and comes back sounding like they were born in the East End. Is that a choice, or is their brain just more leaky?
It is often a combination of high plasticity and a high need to belong. Some people are naturally more prone to convergence. Their internal social radar is constantly scanning the environment and adjusting their speech to match the people around them as a way to minimize social friction. In some cases, it might even be a lack of a strong phonetic anchor. If your original accent was not deeply tied to your identity, or if you have a strong desire to assimilate and disappear into a new culture, your brain might stop fighting the environmental sounds and just let them flow in.
I've always been a bit skeptical of those people, honestly. It feels a bit performative, doesn't it? Like they're trying too hard to fit in. But from what you are saying, it might be a subconscious process they do not even have full control over. They are just high convergers.
It often is entirely subconscious. But there is a flip side. There is also something called linguistic pride or identity maintenance. Many people consciously or subconsciously cling to their accent as a badge of honor. Especially for someone from a place with a very distinct and storied culture like Ireland, that accent is a huge part of who they are. If they lose it, they might feel like they are betraying their roots or losing their soul. In that case, the brain might actually work harder to preserve the original phonetic map as a way of guarding that identity. It is a form of psychological resistance.
That resonates with me. There is something respectable about someone who has lived abroad for decades but still sounds like their hometown. It shows a certain groundedness. It reminds me of our discussion in episode 1043 about the last monoglot and how staying anchored in a single linguistic identity can be a form of cultural survival in a world that wants to blend us all together.
Definitely. And it is important to realize that not losing your accent is not a failure of learning. This is a huge misconception. You can be 100% fluent in a language. You could have the vocabulary of a professor and the grammar of a poet, and still have a thick accent. Proficiency and phonology are two different tracks in the brain. Having an accent just means your brain is being efficient. It is using the motor programs it already knows to deliver new information. It is not a bug, it is a feature of cognitive economy.
So, if you are that Irish guy in Israel, you should not feel like you are failing to adapt because you still sound Irish. You have actually achieved a very high level of cognitive efficiency. You are using the paper towel software on the Irish lilt hardware. It is a custom build.
It is a hybrid system, and that brings up a really interesting point about the social cost of trying to lose an accent. If you spend all your cognitive energy trying to sound like a local, you have less energy available for the actual content of what you are saying. You might become less articulate, less funny, or less creative in your speech because you are so focused on the mechanics of the sound. Sometimes the most fluent thing you can do is just embrace the accent and let the words flow.
I think that is a really empowering takeaway for anyone living in a foreign country. Your accent is not a barrier. It is just the font your voice is written in. As long as people can understand you, the font doesn't change the meaning of the text. It just adds character.
Well said. And in a globalized world, these hybrid accents are becoming the new normal. We are seeing the rise of what some call third culture accents, where people who have lived in multiple countries develop a speech pattern that doesn't quite fit anywhere but makes perfect sense to them. It is a linguistic map of their personal journey. It is a unique dialect of one.
Let's talk about the practical side of this for a minute. If someone does want to modify their accent, maybe for professional reasons, or just to be understood more easily in a noisy environment, what can they actually do, given everything we have talked about with the hardened neural pathways?
The first step is what we talked about earlier, training the ear. You cannot produce a sound you cannot hear. You have to spend time doing active listening, where you focus entirely on the pitch, rhythm, and specific vowel shapes of the target accent. There are actually accent modification specialists who use phonetic charts and physical exercises to show you exactly where to put your tongue and how to shape your throat. It is basically physical therapy for your mouth.
Physical therapy for the mouth. That sounds like a lot of work.
It can be grueling. You are literally trying to break 20 or 30 years of muscle memory. But for most people, the goal shouldn't be to erase the old accent, but rather to expand their phonetic repertoire. It is about becoming bi-dialectal. Just like you can be bilingual, you can learn to switch between your native accent and a more neutral or local one depending on the situation. It is about adding a tool to the toolkit, not throwing the old tools away.
Like a specialized tool for a specific job. I use my Irish tool with my family to maintain that intimacy, and I use my international tool at the office to ensure clarity.
That is the essence of functional code switching. It is not about being fake, it is about being effective in different social contexts. And it is important to remember that most of the reverting we do is totally subconscious. When you are tired, stressed, or around loved ones, your brain is going to take the path of least resistance. Instead of fighting that, you can just acknowledge it as your brain's way of going into power save mode.
I love that. Power save mode. It makes so much sense. So, when our friend Daniel's Irish buddy is at home with his wife, and he is saying paper towel with a Dublin accent, he is just being efficient. He is communicating the right idea while saving his neural energy for the actual conversation and the relationship.
Precisely. And it is a sign of a healthy, secure identity. He doesn't feel the need to perform for his wife because she knows who he is. The accent is a form of intimacy. It is the sound of being home.
This has really changed how I think about accents. They are not just manners of speaking or habits we haven't bothered to break. They are deeply ingrained motor sensory patterns that are tied to our developmental history, our social identity, and our brain's fundamental drive for efficiency.
And they are incredibly resilient. Even in a world where we are all listening to the same podcasts and watching the same movies, our local phonetic fingerprints persist. It is a testament to the power of those early childhood years. The permanent ink of our first language, as we called it in episode 799, really does stay with us. It is the foundation upon which everything else is built.
It is a bit of a comfort, actually. In a world that feels like it is becoming more and more homogenized, your accent is something that is uniquely yours. It is a story you tell every time you open your mouth, whether you mean to or not. It tells people where you came from and, in a way, who you are.
It is your history, audible to the world.
Well, I think we have covered some serious ground here. We have looked at the why of accent durability, the what of phonetic prosody, and the how of those lucky people who can mimic anyone. I hope this gives our listeners, and especially the person who inspired Daniel's prompt, a bit of a new perspective on their own speech. Don't look at it as a lack of adaptation. Look at it as a masterpiece of neural engineering.
Yeah, don't sweat the paper towel thing. It is just your brain being a smart engineer. You are getting the message across, and that is what matters.
Before we wrap up, I want to take a second to say a huge thank you to everyone who has been sticking with us. We have been doing this for a long time now, over 1,000 episodes, and it is the community of curious people like you that keeps us coming back to the studio every week.
It really is. And if you have a second, we would genuinely appreciate it if you could leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever app you are using to listen to our voices right now. It is one of those small things that actually makes a huge difference in helping new people find the show and keeping us on the charts. We see every single one of them, and they mean a lot to us.
Definitely. And if you want to dig into our archives, you can find all 1,031 episodes at our website, myweirdprompts.com. There is a search bar there, so if you're interested in more of the linguistic stuff, you can find those episodes we mentioned today, like episode 799 on language attrition or episode 1043 on the last monoglot.
There is a lot of good stuff in there. We have spent a lot of time thinking about how we communicate and why it matters. It is a rabbit hole worth falling down.
All right, Herman, I think that is a wrap for today. Thanks for bringing the expertise, as always. I feel like I understand my own voice a little better now.
My pleasure, Corn. Always fun to geek out on phonetics and the brain with you.
And thanks again to Daniel for the prompt. Keep them coming, everyone. We will see you all next time on My Weird Prompts.
Take care, everyone.
Bye for now.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow to